What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, we're going to be talking about 10 Deaths of Wolverine #2 by Benjamin Percy and Federico Vicentini, as well as some musings about 10 Lives of Wolverine #2 by Benjamin Percy and Joshua Cassara. And in this video, we are going to talk about what could possibly be the consequences of Wolverine and Omega Red meddling in the past and how it's going to affect the future of not just both characters, but the entirety of Earth 616 as a whole. We'll also be spending some time talking about Maura McTaggart's suddenly being diagnosed with cancer and where it may have possibly come from. And also what's up with this Phalanx version of Wolverine and how much does Destiny know about it? We're going to talk about all this and more right now, but first, if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, hit that subscribe button. I post multiple videos throughout the week, plus live stream the Blerd Cave every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So hit that bell button. That way you don't miss anything. Also, if you enjoy the video, Hulk smash that like button. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about 10 lives and 10 deaths of Wolverine #2.
Can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
When last we left off, and I want to go ahead and give an apology, I was going to do a little video about 10 Lives of Wolverine #2 last week. However, we had an ice storm where I live, and it knocked out the power of over 130,000 houses in my city. So I was literally without power from Thursday last week up until Monday of this week. Apologies, but it couldn't be helped. So I didn't do a video for that particular issue, but we're going to kind of squeeze that into this issue. We do see a lot of meddling in the past. We see meddling on not just Wolverine's part, but also on Omega Red's part, as we saw in 10 Lives of Wolverine #1. We see Omega Red going after one of Charles Xavier's ancestors back in 1900, where they were stranded in ice up in northern Canada. And while this is going on, Omega Red is going after Captain Xavier. Now, this is very likely Charles Xavier's grandfather, not the father that we saw in the previous issue, or maybe it could be, I don't know. Marvel works on a weird sliding time scale, so it's strange and unusual how some of these events actually play out. Whatever the case, Omega Red is about to attempt to kill him. Now, I don't know whether or not he'll be successful. Technically, Wolverine happened to be around in that particular area around roughly that time, and Jean is actually sending him in that direction. An infinitely younger version of Wolverine, even referring to himself as a teenager at that time, so that just give you an idea of exactly how long ago this was. But Wolverine is on the way to try and help save Xavier's ancestor, who, oddly enough, has the exact same watch that we saw Wolverine staring at the beginning of 10 Lives of Wolverine #1. So something tells me that he is successful in this, and that the effects of them meddling with the future, or whatever Wolverine has done with the future, has already gone into play, because he does have that watch he has in his possession, no different than the same watch Xavier's ancestor does. So it would likely explain why he had it in the present, because the effects of him going into the past to affect the future have already occurred. Another thing that also happens in that particular issue is that Wolverine also decides to change his fate when it comes to Team X. Now, in 10 Lives of Wolverine #1, we saw that when he had quantum leaped into the 60s, we discovered that Sabretooth was already trying to kill him. Well, the reason why this is actually the case is because Wolverine has decided to not go through with the plans that Team X had in store for the other villages in Colombia when they took down the drug cartels in the area, because, as he notes to Jean, that they were going to be ordered to burn all the surrounding villages to make those villages fear the American government and no longer be beholden to their cartels. Basically a whole fear us more than you fear them type of deal, and this is something that's never sat right with Wolverine. And initially, he plans to kill Maverick and Sabretooth, and this would drastically alter the timeline going forward if he were to do so. However, he ends up not doing that. He actually kind of takes a half measure between what he wants to do and what Jean doesn't want him to do, and he ends up not killing Maverick or Sabretooth, but he simply just leaves Maverick for dead and maybe just mildly inconveniences Sabretooth. However, he chooses not to go through with the burning of those villages. It's likely still going to happen. He's not really changing anything there, just he's changing his involvement because he doesn't want to be burdened with those memories. The memories of what he's done have all been coming back to him, and he knows these are things that are going to weigh heavy on his heart in the future, and he's deciding to not be a part of it. Now, these actions have likely already paid dividends as well. This could very easily explain why Sabretooth has always had such a vendetta against Wolverine. Not that Sabretooth needed any actual reasons to do so, but maybe this might even be a catalyst to reignite that vendetta between Wolverine and Sabretooth once more, and also might explain why Maverick has been so aggro on Wolverine in the recent pages of Benjamin Percy's Wolverine series. We also learn in this issue how Omega Red comes into the employ of Mikhail Rasputin. And we also learn exactly how Omega Red got the information that he had a tracker built into him, into the carbonadium synthesizer being used in his body, and it was thanks to a recent trip to Moscow where Wolverine, Domino, and Omega Red were supposed to be trying to track down a member of the Moscow chapter of the Hellfire Club, Maxim Ivanov. However, when they get there, they don't find him, but Omega Red finds Colossus's wayward brother, Mikhail Rasputin, who has been a thorn in a lot of ways to Krakoa since the whole House of X era began, and it's him who actually reveals to Omega Red the carbonadium synthesizer in his body has been tampered with, that the mutants messed with his memories, and that they have killed him before. And he likely knows all this because he has data mined the Cerebro sword that he stole from X-Force. Well, more specifically, he stole from Kid Omega. In Benjamin Percy's X-Force number 11 and 12, we saw him snatch Kid Omega through a portal and drag him off to a secret headquarters. And we know that they also did some other meddling with Kid Omega, but more specifically, they had the Cerebro sword at their disposal, which at one point in time used to be an actual Cerebro itself. And we know that he also got the Shi'ar crystals that were also necessary to operate Cerebro in that fashion. So this is how Mikhail Rasputin is staying so far ahead of Krakoa and how he knows so much about them. That said, we also know that Wolverine has been leaping around all over the place, not just to the 60s in Colombia or the early 1900s, but we also know that he is in Japan with Itsu, who is the woman who would eventually become Daken's mother. And I think we actually witnessed the moment that Daken was conceived. But that said, Omega Red is tampering with this part of the timeline because he is going to take over Itsu's body and potentially force Wolverine to have to kill Daken's mother. Now, will he actually do it? Will he actually kill her? We see a part where it looks like he slashes Itsu, but we don't know where or if he even slashes her. I'm gonna go on a limb and say he probably just slashed one of the bone tentacles from Omega Red. But this is also a major moment because if at this point he kills her, Daken ceases to exist. Now, getting away from that, let's get more into what's going on with 10 Deaths of Wolverine. In this one, we discover that Mora is still on the run, and more importantly, she has gotten information from Jane Foster. I kind of had a sneaky suspicion that 10 Deaths of Wolverine number 1 was not going to be the only time that we saw the character. Apparently, Mora's been keeping her number in her back pocket, and Jane has actually been looking into some of the information in the x-rays and files that were taken of Mora when she went to the doctor and learned that she had cancer. And in this moment, we discovered that the cancer cells in Mora's body, they seem to be laced with floronic matter that could only come from one place, and Mora instantly recognizes it as being the No Place biome. And what she's realized is that apparently, and I don't think she's referring to Destiny or Mystique, but I feel like she's referring to Xavier and Magneto because in this case, she feels ultimately betrayed. We know that the tea that Mora had been drinking was laced with a tracker as of the events of Inferno, but apparently it also had something else in it. They were feeding her some kind of a cancer and are using it now to eliminate her now that she's no longer human. And also to tie up any loose ends should she ever somehow miraculously become a mutant again and were to be killed, it would reset everything. But Mora also realizes that there's another way that the mutants have been keeping up with her, and it's also the arm that Cypher had given her, a piece of Warlock to act as her arm after it had been severed by Mystique and Destiny. And this is one of those moments where it kind of feels like, well, duh, yeah, of course they did that. Why did it take her this long to realize it? But she does ultimately wind up removing said arm, and she uses it as a trap because Mystique is still on her trail, and the trap is ultimately successful. And this is also kind of funny to me because Destiny knew that this would happen, and she tried to warn Mystique that she couldn't change the future that Destiny saw, that it wasn't negotiable as she claims that Mystique seems to think that it is. And Mora uses this arm to set a trap for Mystique, and it works. She sets off a bomb, exploding the entire motel where she was hiding out at and killing Mystique. So Mystique is off her trail for now, but you know, mutant resurrection protocols, she'll likely be back very soon. But in this moment, we learn Destiny knows a lot more than what she's saying. She even seems to be very clear on an idea of a man in black, and what she envisions is the Phalanx Wolverine that we've seen walking around, who, yes, he is operating in a very Terminator style fashion, even coming to the exploded motel and just walking straight into the fire, and for the most part, ignoring police that aren't directly in his path. And those that attack him, he retaliates. But he's also able to track everything that Mora has been looking into, and he ends up figuring out exactly where her next move is going to be, and that's the memory cloud data mogul, Arnab Shaklandar. And it's in this moment that Mora realizes who's on her trail. Up to this point, she's only been aware of Mystique, but now she knows about Wolverine, and she sees that he's clearly being taken over by the Phalanx. And she even admits that she knew this day would come, that the Phalanx would eventually come and destroy all life, but she didn't think that it would get here so fast. Now, this is actually, once again, we've talked about this before, but this is a direct callback to House of X and Powers of 10. More specifically, Powers of 10, number 6, where we learn in that issue that Mora becomes keenly aware that the Phalanx is coming. She's warned about it, and the librarian is the one who actually informs her of this, even though the librarian has no reason to help her or tell her anything. But it is, in fact, the librarian who kind of pulls back the curtain and informs her about how the Phalanx is coming one day, and it's going to destroy not just mutants, but humans as well. And I won't say so much destroy them, but assimilate them into their collective, which would, for all intents and purposes, destroy their individuality, and I guess, yeah, technically it would destroy them all. And while it seemed like the librarian was just gonna let Mora continue to perpetuate herself and do what she does, die, and then take the information back into the past and then try and affect the future, he does eventually kind of let it on that, yeah, maybe I'm just gonna let this whole thing play out as it's already gonna and not change anything. And this is kind of where we get the whole Wolverine killing the librarian and then killing Mora to send her back so that she can change the future and hopefully avert this whole Phalanx business. But as we see here, as the Trickster Titan that sent back Omega Sentinel into the past so that she could change and affect the future for Orcus, it seems that they've also sent a Wolverine back as well, one who, while he doesn't necessarily say it out loud, he doesn't read the quiet part out loud, there's a signal that kind of follows him around, something that just constantly sends a looped message that simply says, we are Phalanx. So a lot of people that are still been kind of on the fence, like, oh, the Phalanx aren't coming. Oh, it's not the Phalanx, it's something else. No, it's definitely the Phalanx. And I'm gonna go on a limb and say, I think that this Phalanx Wolverine that we see that's been hunting her down, I'm gonna go on a limb and say this is the same Wolverine who killed her in year 1000 in Powers of 10, number 6. Something tells me the Trickster Titan likely plucked this Wolverine out of the time stream and sent him after Mora, because that's one of the things we don't really know. Like, we know that, yeah, when Mora dies, she resets the timeline, but who's to say that those timelines don't actually continue? Maybe they end for Mora, but maybe they still carry on for everybody else. And as the librarian pointed out, the Phalanx were well on their way. They were about to assimilate the Earth as we know it in that timeline right before Mora was killed and reset the timeline. So who's to say, yeah, the Phalanx didn't just go ahead and assimilate that Earth, that timeline just carried on, and we're just only seeing things from Mora's perspective. Or even if that timeline does completely end, if the Trickster Titan is as powerful as we can imagine, powerful enough to send someone from another timeline to a completely different one, I mean, it's safe to say that he could potentially do the exact same thing yet again with a dead timeline. But anyways, yeah, back to it. I think this Wolverine is the same Wolverine that killed her. I'm gonna go ahead and call that right now. Or maybe it's the Wolverine from Powers of 10, number 3, where we were focused on Mora's 9th life, where they got the information they needed about Nimrod and placed it within Mora, and then that Wolverine killed her, sending her on to the next life. If that was the case, that'd be cool, but I think it would be more poetic if it was the Wolverine from year 1000 in Powers of 10, number 6. But one thing I do like here is that Mora is remembering everything from all her previous lives. A lot of people tend to forget that she still has those memories, and not just the memories, but those abilities as well. People forget about Mora's 7th life, where she became a part of the British Armed Forces, and she was just going around assassinating every single person connected to Bolivar Trask. Yeah, she still has that training, and apparently she still has a sniper rifle hanging around. So basically what we're getting here is Maura McTaggart is about to be on some whole Sarah Connor shenanigans as she's about to face off against a Terminator in the form of Wolverine. But yeah, I like what's going on here with all this. Like I said, there's a lot of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey shenanigans going here. And while I'm not the biggest fan of time travel stories, in this case, Benjamin Percy is doing a really good job of making sure that the stakes always stay high in this matter, that there is consequence for something, or at least the potential for consequence, as we talked about with 10 Lives of Wolverine, the whole idea of Wolverine having to fight and maybe potentially be forced to kill Itsu. Now, granted, yes, we know Itsu does die eventually. She's going to be killed at the order of Romulus, and a brainwashed Winter Soldier is going to be the one to pull the trigger on her. Now, of course, Daken would be removed from Itsu's womb at the time that she was murdered. And of course, we would get Daken as we know today, and it's kind of why he's as f***ed up as he is, or at least how he used to be very f***ed up. But at this particular point, I don't think Daken is even close to have even being born yet, so that could never happen. So yeah, there are some serious stakes here. And like I said, I'm still continuing to love this story. But anyways, let me know what you thought about both 10 Lives and 10 Deaths of Wolverine. Number 2, keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.